What are the best rogue decks in Yu-Gi-Oh right now? Big dog, I've composed a tier list with some of the most popular decks that have topped over the last couple of weekends, and I've also taken in consideration the strategies you wanted me to talk about in the comment section. Big dog, make sure you are going to that comment section and telling every single deck you can think of. And today, I'm going to be ranking them from top rogue all the way down to just a rogue. Hey, at least you got your boy doing Kendrick Lamar triple entendres here. The rug, the floor, that's the floor of a rogue deck you could be playing. You know the third entendre, you'll find it down below. Let's go ahead and jump on in. So the criteria for this tier list is incredibly simple. As a rogue strategy, we have to realize a few things. The importance of your strategy is going to be a mixture on how good of a player you are, plus how strong is your deck against some of the top decks in the game. Right now, as of making this tier list, going through the data, I would say the top 3 in most played decks are Tenpai Dragon, Voiceless Voice, and of course, your boy Snake Eyes. We will be seeing how these strategies go against those decks and what they can do to be able to keep up with them. Another thing we want to take into account is some of the most played cards in the game right now. I would strongly urge you guys to reference my staples tier list if you want to find out more information about that. But to give you a quick rundown on some of the cards we need to be watching out for, or we probably should be incorporating playing: Kashtira Fenrir, Change of Heart, Super Poly, Forbidden Droplet. I think all of those cards play a huge role into Yu-Gi-Oh right now. And of course, like I said, I mentioned some of the strategies that you guys talked about in the comment section. So keep them coming, guys. Keep them wacky. Let's go ahead and start off with Scareclaw. I think the days of players playing Scareclaw traditionally using the level 3 monsters like Astra and Balone is long over. The monsters in your deck need to be able to do multiple things, and if you play those level 3 Scareclaws, you're essentially playing normal monsters with none of the benefits. Fortunately enough, because of cards like Visas Samsara, Scareclaw is actually a pretty functional deck without them. Unfortunately, even though it does have some really good one-card combos that can Synchro, Fusion, and Exceed Summon, and also has some decent board breaking capabilities, I'm still gonna say that it's a rug type deck. Losing cards like Better on the Floor was huge for this strategy, bigger than most other strategies that you can fathom. And while I still don't doubt this board's deck building capabilities, especially since it does have access to Vicious Astral Out, I would say right now that there are better strategies that would be more effective against the meta. Next would be Rescue Ace. I'm in danger. Rescue Ace is interesting. If you were a budget player, I would tell you to stay far away from Rescue Ace as possible. Why? Is because Snake Eyes legitimately carries the deck. But being able to resolve a healthy Rescue Ace Turbulence means that you'll be able to win the game. The problem is that since players are playing hand traps like Ghost Mourner, Affect Veiler, and Infinite Impermanence to the max, it's going to be a little bit harder. I still think that this deck is good enough to steal W's though. Rescue Ace players, a card that I would strongly recommend inside of your deck is Saravis the Ancient and Ascendant. Protect your Rescue Ace Turbulence from getting stolen, and I think you'll have an easier chance to be able to win games. This deck is still a strategy that has topped in the last couple of weeks too. Next is Dinos. Dinos best deck! Let's go! Dinos remind me a lot like Scareclaw. It's a deck that is really good at going second and breaking board. And a lot of players have been experimenting by playing Dino Thunder, using Thunder Dragon Colossus as its inboard. Yeah, dog, it's still not one of the better rogue decks in the game. I think one of the biggest things that we have to talk about with Dino is the immense power creep that's happened in Yu-Gi-Oh! The best strategies in the game right now have instant one-card combos, and Dino consistently needs 2, which isn't a problem, but when you need 2 specific cards, that's when things start to become shaky, especially if you have to play more bricks inside of your deck, which Dino does play. Essentially, I'm telling Konami to bring Misk off the ban list to 3 so we can max out on all those babies so we can start popping them with ease. Centurion. Centurion is a natural blend of a modern Yu-Gi-Oh deck. It can one-card combo in so many different ways and has extenders just in case it gets hand trapped. It even has a win condition that just outright wins games. Hot Red Dragon Archfiend Calamity, though this deck isn't built on that to be able to win games anymore. I think that out of all of the rogue strategies that we have here, this is a strategy that can challenge the meta. If you are able to resolve Hot Red Dragon Archfiend Calamities, you'll win the game against a lot of decks. But even if you aren't, this deck has so many ways to be able to disable the meta. It's a strategy that can now play Dimension Shifter, and it also has so many other nuances that can be built to be able to disrupt what the opponent is doing. Unchained. Unchained technically did get support. I don't know what they were thinking when Konami made Nightmare Throne with the ability to add any Fiend monster with 0/0. That means not only can it add Infernal Grave Squirmer, which can destroy Unchained cards and be a free extender, it can also add the level 2 monster that was originally used for Sacred Beasts. Who am I kidding? We never used that card for Sacred Beasts. Unchained was actually a pretty good deck that was kept under the wraps, and now with the new Fiend support, I think it's a solid choice. Now, Unchained does have a couple of problems. The first is that it is a deck that ironically does need 2 cards to be able to play most of the time. But fortunately, unlike some of the other strategies, it's almost 2 of any card to be able to full combo, and does still have 1 card combos. Unchained also makes hand traps look completely silly, which is a plus when you're going against decks like Tenpai Dragon and Snake Eyes, which play a ton of them. Dragon Link. Guys, I think losing Baron de Fleur and Borreload Savage Dragon hit this deck the most, especially since we didn't get cards like Bestial Magnemite or Chaos Space off the list. I don't think that this deck is complete utter garb, but I think it takes a good pipe. Its inboards are still kind of crazy. You can make a Hot Red Dragon, Archfiend, a Bestial Dispatter, and Borrolin Dragon. The problem is that it takes up all of your hands and you lose easy to cards like Forbidden Droplet and Triple Tactics Talent. It's down bad for this deck right now. Yubel. If you guys didn't know, I actually have a Yubel deck profile that you can check out. It's all types of crazy. I even went as far to say on my meta tier list that Yubel was a top meta deck. Unfortunately, statistics proved me wrong, and that's why we're in the rogue tier list. The cool thing though is that I said Yubel has a Raid Raptors arc from Phantom Nightmare. Its floor is that it'll be able to top multiple regionals throughout the course of the format, and it's done exactly just that. It's a deck that can challenge the meta. Super Polymerization is crazy in this deck, and this strategy can play 4 and make them searchable. What I like about Yubel so much is that it's incredibly sticky. This is another one of those strategies that can 1 and 2 card combo its way, but the most important thing is that when your opponent is trying to destroy the cards, they just keep coming back. And it also makes one of the only Omni negations that's accessible in Yu-Gi-Oh right now in Verujas. Bro, Verujas will cook you if you let him. Vanquish Soul. Vanquish Soul is my baby. I absolutely love this deck because it takes a big brain to be able to play, but that's also Vanquish Soul's problem. It takes a big brain to be able to play. I'm gonna put Vanquish Soul in solid choice. Vanquish Soul does have the quantities to be able to top a YCS. It almost did it at the last YCS. The only unfortunate thing is that the deck does price itself out of a lot of players, and it is a little bit more nuanced to be able to play effectively. But the best thing about this deck is being able to dodge hand traps and effectively burger burn your opponent. Phantom Knights. This was something that you guys requested. The best version of Phantom Knights is probably Phantom Knight Horus. And I gotta say, I absolutely love the Phantom Knight cards, and I love Horus even more. But there's no level of cope that's gonna make me put Phantom Knights above the Rogue. Phantom Knights are massively power crept. It's not even funny. And what's weird is that the new support isn't that old, but the problem with Phantom Knights is that it needs to be updated with modern time. And just for reference, I think that the Rug can still be solid local level Yu-Gi-Oh decks. But when we start going into those other events, it becomes a lot harder for these strategies to compete. Also, in case you were wondering, if your strategy isn't on here, it's probably because it's on another tier list. I tried my best not to repeat myself or confuse people by putting strategies on multiple different tier lists unless it's absolutely necessary. Tier limit. This deck doesn't die. I talked about budget light sworns in my last tier list. Then I also talked about it in my meta tier list. This time I'm going to be focusing specifically on light sworn tier limit. I think the deck's good. The light sworn cards allow you to be able to mill more cards from your deck to the graveyard, making the deck a little bit more consistent. Tier limit was already a pretty decent deck, and being able to make totally awesome is a lot more valuable. I think it's a solid choice. Ultimately, you can see the tiers drop when the tiers drop. As much as you hate this deck, you gotta love its continued success. Labyrinth. Labyrinth reminds me of the oldest child. The oldest child normally gets the most expectation. We expect Labyrinth to be a top tier meta contending Yu-Gi-Oh deck. But in reality, Labyrinth is closer towards a rogue strategy that underachieved. Let's just be honest. In contrast, Branded is the opposite. It's like the youngest child. No matter what Branded does, people will always look up to it. While no matter what Labyrinth achieves, people will always look down on it. I just thought that dichotomy between those two decks is really crazy because overall, they're the same deck. I think Labyrinth is a solid choice Yu-Gi-Oh deck. My biggest problem that's preventing me from putting it into Can Challenge is that players are starting to main board Ghost Bell alongside of Ash Blossom, which is this deck's kryptonite. But if it were just Ash Blossom we had to deal with, Transaction Rollback clears that easy. I still think that Labyrinth is an incredibly good deck, and if you were wondering where I would put Branded, Can Challenge. Pearly has proven itself to be a strategy that was rightfully put on the ban list when nobody expected it. It's 100% a rogue Yu-Gi-Oh strategy that can challenge. It's crazy how them kitties get real dangerous when you stack a big Noir on the field. Then those claws start to show out, disrupting the graveyard and the field while having an invincible monster as well. Pearly excels in formats where hand traps are a problem because they have natural protection through their field spell for most of the hand traps and can also play a ton to be able to stifle your opponent. Orcus now. I gotta say, I'm really happy that Orcus is off the ban list. But if we're sticking to that family comparison, Orcus is that cousin that you never see at any family gatherings unless there's food involved. And then they disappear. Bro, why you be showing up for the food, bro? I mean, I ain't gonna lie, it do be making sense, and you be avoiding our aunties and uncles fighting, so it makes sense. I think Orcus is ironically good enough to steal W's. This deck completely slaps when it does, and has a searchable Omni negation that banishes your opponent's cards in Orcus Crescendo. On top of that, this is also another one of those Horus decks, and you should already know how good the Horus cards are. They allow this deck to be able to excel and give it another dimension that it previously didn't have. Synchron, Yusei's deck. On the contrary to Jack Atlas's Red Dragon Archfiend, which I think is good enough to steal W's, I think that Synchron is the rug. Yusei genuinely did get shafted with his support. It's not terrible, but losing cards like Baron de Fleur and Borreload Savage Dragon did not help this strategy's case. Sprite. I still think that Sprite is an incredible strategy. Definitely good enough to steal those W's. The best thing about Sprite is that it dodges a lot of important staple cards in the game, and it can also have room to play those important staple cards. The two main problems with this strategy, I would have to say, is that Sprite Elf is banned, and there hasn't been a lot of great level 2s to be able to help carry right now. Overall, though, it's still an incredibly good deck. I would also put Rika in the good enough to steal W's. This is probably the strongest Rika strategy that we have available, guys. But I wouldn't say that it's necessary to play Ragnaraka Rika. Unfortunately, one thing that I did notice is that players are starting to main Cosmic Cyclone a little bit more, and I would say that that's one of the deck's biggest nightmares, having your field spell Cosmic Cyclone, because it carries and does so much value. Overall, though, still an extremely good Yu-Gi-Oh deck. Goatee. I think that if players played Goatee more, they would realize it's a really good deck. Goatee Deep Beyond literally clears so many boards in the game right now, it's crazy. A comparison to Goatee? Goatee is that crazy uncle that nobody don't want to mess with. You never really know what he's saying or what he's doing, but if something ever goes down, he was the one that threw the chair first. You guys asked me to talk about Dark Magician, specifically Dark Magician Chimera. Yeah, I think that Dark Magician, out of all the strategies that are listed here, is a strategy that probably can't even compete consistently at a local level, guys. It is severely powercraft. Solomon Great just got a new card called Code of Soul. And if you guys don't know what Code of Soul does for the deck, it does a lot. Allowing you to be able to continuously link summon and giving more value to your Solomon Great links has always been crazy. I think that a lot of people are just pressed on Solomon Great because of Nibiru. But if you've seen my last deck profile, you know Nibiru does absolutely nothing against the deck. It's a strategy that 100% can challenge. A fire deck that can really go toe-to-toe with other fire decks, can play a ton of hand traps, and can play around them. It also can search Solomon Great Roar, and I think that we need to bring urgency to strategies that can search Omni negates. They're pretty good right now. Now, if there's anybody that was coping with me, it's definitely the person that told me to mention Evil Eye. I genuinely want to put Evil Eye into Can Challenge. It's fame. It technically got support. But realistically, guys, I think at best it takes a good pilot. Evil Eye can finish games really fast. Unfortunately, not 10 Pi Dragon fast with the type of damage it can put out, but can still end games decently fast. It might be coping to put it in takes a really good pilot, but the new Fiend support really does help all Fiend strategies out, and it could be a little bit better than what a lot of players will talk about. Sword Soul. We all know Sword Soul is good enough to still W's, guys. It plays Arch Nemesis Protos. That's a walking W in itself. Sword Soul is the best deck to consistently use Arch Nemesis Protos, so I'm going to put it in good enough to still W's, and I think that's where it stays probably throughout the rest of the format. Manadium. Bro, y'all want to cope with me? I'm going to put Manadium in takes a good pilot. Losing both Borreload and Baron de Fleur is nasty, but I've seen some Manadium players cook up some pretty good spice. The only problem is that other decks are a little bit more spicier. If you're a stun player, I really want to put you under the rug, but Dogmatica stun, yeah, no, it's the rug. Thankfully enough, stun is not in a good spot. Because the Yu-Gi-Oh meta has diversified itself, you can't singularly focus on one particular strategy to beat. Good. Catch Terror will probably forever be a solid choice Yu-Gi-Oh deck. As long as we got Finra and Unicorn and Birth, we cooking over here. The deck consistently not only plays through hand traps, but some of the most popular cards in the game, and flourishes in a state where we can make Yu-Gi-Oh dumb again. This is probably your stun deck that you should look towards if you want to eat glue and play a deck that does give you some type of importance. Next is Chimera. Chimera is actually ridiculously good with Nightmare Apprentice. I think it's one of the decks that can absolutely challenge the meta. The downside that I will mention is that, like I said before, players are starting to experiment with Cosmic Cyclone in the main board, which does hurt Chimera Fusion, but overall, this strategy is really good at being able to out-resource your opponent and play through hand traps. It can give some of the top decks in the game a run for their money. Cyber Dragon. Originally, I had this on here as a joke, but I've played Cyber Dragon, and there's some really good qualities that you need to know about. The first one is Clockwork Knight, being zombie world to decks like 10 Pi Dragon. The next is Clockwork Knight, allowing you to be able to link off all of your opponent's monsters just by summoning a Cyber Dragon. The Horus gives the deck a little bit of oomph and allows it to be able to go first. I think with the right player, this deck is good enough to still W's. Ironic, because there's more links, Cyber Dragon became a little bit stronger in the game and actually a formidable deck with the right player's hands. Galaxy Eyes. Galaxy Eyes. Yeah, my boy H Empowered is coming from my neck when he finds out that Galaxy Eyes is this low. Unfortunately, Kite support, while being fun looking, isn't good enough in the game right now. But that could change with the new Tachyon support. Spellbooks did some things, and they continue to do things. Now, Spellbooks have been topping. I still don't think that Spellbooks is better than Sky Striker. I think Sky Striker takes a good pilot and can consistently top. I think Spellbook still might be the rug. Nothing really changes for Spellbook other than getting Upstart Goblin to 3. So I don't think that that's enough to be able to make this deck a top contender. Sky Striker, though, is incredibly good and with the right pilot can destroy. They just also might get the cops called on them, like a family reunion party. Crazy! Sky Strikers might just be the crazy aunt. Makes a mean potato salad, though. And lastly is Horus. I think Horus is probably the best version of Stun, because while it does play like a stun deck, summoning cards like Light and Darkness Dragon and Vanity's Emptiness, is that the right one? The level 8 fairy one. It also can summon Horus monsters and use it for its bidding. I would say out of all of the stun decks, this is probably the strongest and does take a good pilot. And that's all that I have for my Rogue tier list. I'm actually excited to see what you guys have to say. Of course, if you want to see more amazing videos, be sure to check out these so I can catch you on the next one.